When I think America, I think semiconductors imported from Taiwan, steel imported from Canada, silicon for microchips imported from Russia, who we're probably enemies with, the plastics imported from China, who we're also probably enemies with, all forged together to make the greatest statement of freedom a true American could dream of. A giant metal monument to independence, who definitely was 100% American-made, from parts we totally only got from America. Don't think about it. Think something something burger, something something bald eagles. Freedom. Football. America.
Accessing dictionary database. Entry. Democracy.
Well, I guess it is no surprise then with the Fallout decks coming out that we are going to have to tackle one of the commanders of those decks today, and I want to go ahead and let you guys know this is a special episode. Not only are we building a $15 deck with a bit of a caveat, not only are we building that deck, but we are also going to be building a separate version of the deck that is going to have a budget of $125, both in one video. And this is all because this is actually part of a collaboration between me and another creator, my first one on this channel. Today's video is a collaboration between me and Ttrgr, who also runs the channel MTG The Stack, and me and him both together collaborated on making the deck. And if you watch till the end of the video, you will see both the $15 version of the deck and the version of the deck that is $125 that he will be playing over on the Stack itself once this video is over. Actually, that is going to be on a live stream literally a few hours after this video uploads. A link will be in the description and in the pinned comment if I remember to do that. I sincerely hope I remember to do that. But if you want to see gameplay of the $125 version of the deck, please check out The Stack. Go subscribe to his channel. The editing is fantastic, and there's lots of Magic the Gathering gameplay to be had over there if you would like. And again, if you want to see the deck in action, the $125 version of the deck will be over there, and the $15 version of the deck will actually have a few gameplay videos later on down the road as well. So please keep tuned for those of you who have been asking for gameplay videos. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the deck. Now, I did say there's going to be a caveat, and the caveat is we actually do not know what the price of several of the cards from the Fallout set are going to be once they hit the secondary market. So, we're going to go ahead and go with Liberty Prime as if he is a $1 or less commander like any other commander you could find in a precon, and we are going to treat any card that is exclusive to the decks as a 10 to 50 cent card, which will get us to that $15 budget. So even though the deck shows in total that it is a $51 deck right now, it's actually still within that $15 budget, because the commander is apparently taking up $30 of that budget, since we don't actually know what his price is going to be. And like I said, we don't know what the price of the other cards are going to be. So we're going to treat them as 10 to 50 cent cards. And I think that's more than fair, as they are precons, and generally speaking, when we get new precons, they tend to have a few months as they circulate around everywhere, and their price drops like stones. And then, if you remember the Necron Doctor Who deck that we built before, that's about what you end up expecting most cards in a precon to end up being price-wise, anywhere between 10 and 50 cents, except for the like one or two cards that tend to be 10 to 20 bucks that we start getting in a lot of precons these days. I thought that the days of Fierce Guardianship were over. Apparently, they are not. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get the caveats are done. Let's talk about Liberty Prime. He is an America commander. If you could not tell from the beginning of the video, he is a red, white, and blue and 2 Voltron-style commander. At least that's how we're going to be playing him. He's got Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And he's 8/8 for 5 mana. Holy balls, that's power creep. So if he attacks or blocks, we have to sacrifice him unless we pay 2 energy counters, and we can pay 2 and tap him to sack any artifact to gain 2 energy counters and then draw a card. So, a couple things here. This is the first of 2 commanders in Magic the Gathering's history that care about energy counters. There's not really that many legendary creatures that actually care about energy. So we have Liberty Prime here as one of the first ones. So we get to do a very unique build. We get to build a Voltron deck that cares about energy counters and has a few other really interesting notes because of that. So let's go ahead and talk about game plan. If you've ever played a Voltron style deck, the goal of these decks is to get a commander to about 21 power or about 11 power with double strike, and they want to deal 21 commander damage to whoever you are fighting at the table so that you can win the game. They do have the side effect of clearing one person out of the board and then becoming a huge target as everybody realizes, oh, the Voltron commander's online, we have to kill them. So our goal is to eliminate the biggest threat on the table as fast as possible and then immediately pivot into beating the ever-loving sludge out of everyone else at the table very, very quickly. So let's talk about how we are going to be doing that. First of all, we have a 5-mana commander, so of course we need to talk ramp. We need to be able to get this commander online somehow, some way. So let's begin with, of course, Mere Convert, pay 2 life and tap it to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. We can also have Scampering Surveyor, enters the battlefield, grabs any basic land or cave card and puts it onto the battlefield for us. Now, it should be noted that our commander sacks any artifact for his ability, so Liberty Prime can actually sacrifice both the Mere Convert and the Scampering Surveyor. Speaking of cards he can sack when he needs to, Marble Diamond, Fire Diamond, Sky Diamond, it's a budget build. You know that these are going to be in here. 2 mana rocks that do lots and lots of work. Then we have Vidalcan Engineer, a 2-mana mana dork that can add 2 mana of any color as long as it is for artifacts, spells, or the activated abilities of artifacts. That is huge. Then we have Honored Heirloom, a 3-mana mana rock that allows us to exile a card from a person's graveyard so that the reanimation players can be told they don't get to play Magic the Gathering today. This is America. We don't like necromancy. We'll do Salem Witch Trials to the necromancers. Then we have Foundry Inspector. All of our artifacts cost 1 less. Enthusiastic Mechanaut and Ethereum Sculptor all do the same thing. And then we have something special, something real neat. Let me introduce you to Sonic Screwdriver, for those of you who might have not paid attention with the deluge of extra crap Wizards of the Coast has handed us. This is such a cool card for this deck. So, it can tap to add a mana of any color, cool, or you can pay 1 mana and tap it to untap any artifact, or pay 2 and tap it to scry 1, or pay 3 and tap it and target creature can't be blocked this turn. So this does so much shit with our commander. Think about this. Okay, so our commander wants to draw cards with his ability, and he gets us energy with his ability, and we need to stockpile energy so our commander can attack and block. Liberty Prime has to tap to use his ability to give us energy. So, not only can the Sonic Screwdriver pay for our commander to get him out quickly, but we can also use it to make him unblockable when he's online, and we can use him to untap himself repeatedly and in the middle of combat, mind you, so that he can constantly generate all of the energy he possibly could want and draw us tons and tons of cards. This card does so much work in this deck. If you are playing against this deck and they drop a Sonic Screwdriver, you actually probably should kill the Sonic Screwdriver because it is putting in so much damn work into what the deck wants to do. But our commander wants to sacrifice lots and lots of cards, and typically in a Voltron deck, we want to make sure that we are suiting up the commander with lots of equipment cards, lots of auras, and we want him to be able to hit for big. Now, we're not going to be doing any of that today. Oh, no. This is America. This is the deck of rabid individualism. Do you not see this, man? Do you not see this hulking machine made from imported parts from a whole bunch of countries that we propagandize to you are bad? Don't you realize what Liberty Prime is going to be doing? He's coming for Phyrexia. He's coming there only for one reason. They have oil. Liberty Prime would immediately take a portal into Phyrexia just because they have oil. That's all he has to hear. But let's talk about how we're going to be suiting him up. Because an 8/8 commander with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste is enough, but that's not going to get us there. Oh, no. What's going to get us there is this. This is the modular package. That's right. I did it again. I will always find some way to shoehorn modular into a deck if I can, because I am a Hardened Scales player at heart. I love that deck so much in Modern, so you are going to have to choke on that in Commander 2 if you play against me. So let's take a look at what each of our creatures do and why they are in the deck. So, starting with Arcbound Prototype, a 2-mana 2/2 with Modular 2. Whenever it dies, it takes 2 of its 1/1 counters, or any of the 1/1 counters that it has, and throws them onto another artifact creature. It also comes into play with 2 1/1 counters. So, here is the game plan. We have Liberty Prime, and we look at somebody and go, you have oil. I want the oil, so I'm going to punch you in the noggin. I need to sacrifice an artifact to gain the energy to punch you in the noggin. That's fine. Let's say we have the energy from a previous turn. We swing Liberty Prime. It's got Vigilance. Now, we immediately tap him in the middle of combat with his ability to draw ourselves a card and generate the energy for the next attack. That means we sacrifice something like this Arcbound Prototype. It dies, giving us the energy, giving us the draw, and then immediately putting the 1/1 counters on Liberty Prime before he touches somebody in the schnoz. Now, this means Liberty Prime is hitting them for a whopping 10 damage if he is sacrificing the Arcbound Prototype. But what if we have Sonic Screwdriver? Well, that means we untap him in the middle of the same combat and sacrifice another creature, like this Arcbound Malzer. It has Modular 1, and it puts a 1/1 counter on a creature. Now our commander has 11 power. Now all we have to do is give him Double Strike, and suddenly he's killing people instantly with the power of freedom. Now, I understand a 1-mana 1/1 with modular isn't enough for you, but what if there was another 1-mana 1/1 with modular we could sacrifice with Arcbound Javelier? We can also tap it to remove X 1/1 counters from it to deal X damage to an attacking or blocking creature, which is a niche thing we can do when we desperately need it, but generally speaking, we're not going to use this. Arcbound Slasher is also cool. It's got Modular 4, so our commander sacks it. He's automatically in the Double Strike lethal zone, and he's got Riot, so that means he can come in with an extra 1/1 counter to feed to America, or we can have him have haste to punch somebody in the noggin really, really quickly if we so choose. Then we have Arcbound Whelp. It has Modular 2. Then we have Arcbound Shikari. It is a 3-mana creature with Modular 2, but when it comes into play, it puts a 1/1 counter on every other artifact creature we control. Yes, that includes our commander. This is automatically giving all of our modular creatures extra stuff to work with, and it is making our commander hit even harder. Then we have Arcbound Tracker. It's got Modular 2 for a 3-mana creature. Arcbound Worker has Modular 1. Then Arcbound Slith has Modular 1 as a 2-mana creature, and if it deals combat damage to a player, if it gets in early, it gets another 1/1 counter so that its labor can be used for the power of freedom and burgers. Then we have Zabaz. Oh boy, Zabaz. This little bug, if you've ever played Modern, this guy does so much work. Modular 1, but that's the beginning of it. He's a 1/1 with Modular 1, and then not only is he going to throw his 1/1 counters on other things when he dies, if any other card with a modular triggered ability would put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature, instead you put 1 more 1/1 counter on a creature than you otherwise would. So if our commander sacrifices an Arcbound Worker, he gets not 1 1/1 counter, but 2 1/1 counters from that exchange. If he would get 2 1/1 counters from the exchange, now he gets 3. Now, it should be noted, the way modular works. Modular is both a static and a triggered ability. The static ability puts the 1/1 counters on the creature when it enters the battlefield. The triggered ability is the thing that will throw 1/1 counters to any other creature that is an artifact when the Zabaz or any other modular creature dies. Now, the reason that's important, Zabaz says if a modular triggered ability would happen, so he does not act as a Hardened Scales for this deck. He only increases the amount of counters that we are transferring over. This is because the way modular works is you have a static ability that gives the 1/1 counters and then a triggered ability that transfers them. If it was a triggered ability on both ends, then the creatures would automatically die when they entered the board because state-based actions would see them as 0/0s before any triggers could happen. They would automatically die, and then you would have no 1/1 counters to go anywhere. So that's why Zabaz doesn't double things up. I know people have had trouble with that before, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's how that works. That's the explanation for modular for anybody who does not know. But now, let's talk about Together Forever. This is also in our modular package because of how silly it is. So when it enters the battlefield, support 2. You put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 creatures. Then you can choose a creature with a 1/1 counter on it whenever you pay 1, and if that creature dies this turn, return it to the owner's hand. So what are we doing with this? We're going to have this card like Arcbound Javelier. Our commander's going to sacrifice it, and then because it has a 1/1 counter, Together Forever is just going to throw it back into our hand to cast again. And because most of the modular package is 1 and 2 and 3 mana, we get to do this over and over and over with our commander as we untap him to get him ready for the pummeling of your life. This man gets to hit you twice or once, but either way, you get a concussion from America. But as with any good deck, I can't just talk about the linchpin of the deck, the way we are getting in. We also have to make sure that we are removing all of your shit from the game so that we can survive. So we have a 12-card removal package, starting with my boy, my son, Meteor Golem. This is the best thing to ever happen to Magic the Gathering. A 7-mana creature with 3/3 that can blow up any non-land permanent an opponent controls, and it's an artifact, so our commander can see it. That also, because we can put 1/1 counters on any card with things like modular creatures, Together Forever can let us just reuse Meteor Golem over and over and over again. Oh boy, this is a great card for a deck like this. I know that I say Meteor Golem's great in every deck that I've ever put him in, but trust me when I say he's especially good here. And so is his brother, the Spine of Isha. So the Spine says it blows up any permanent, it even can kill lands, and if it's put into a graveyard, return it to your hand. So we get to play this, blow up a card, sack it with our commander, draw a card, get energy, and then play it again, over and over and over again. We get to rule the board. Then we have Rip Apart, a sorcery that can deal 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker, or blow up an artifact or an enchantment. A Braid, an instant that can deal 3 damage to a creature or blow up an artifact. Disruption Protocol, which can counter a spell, and it can pay cost 2 instead of 3 if we tap an artifact when we use it. Negate can counter any non-creature spell. Resculpt can exile an artifact or a creature, replacing it with a blue-red elemental creature token. Reject Imperfection can counter a spell, and if that spell's mana value is 3 or less, we get to Proliferate, which I don't know if I have to tell you. That increases the 1/1 counters of all of our modular creatures, and it increases the amount of energy counters that we as a player have. So cards like Reject Imperfection, anything with Proliferate on it, is pulling double and triple duty in our deck, giving us more 1/1 counters so the commander hits harder, and giving us more 1/1 counters so the modular creatures can give more counters to the commander, and increasing our energy count so that we can keep punching and blocking, all in the name of propaganda. I mean freedom. Then we have Fuel for the Cause. Counter any spell, then Proliferate. Serum Snare, it lets us proliferate after bouncing any non-land permanent to its owner's hand if the mana value is 3 or less. That's how we get the Proliferate off of that. Then we have Electro Siphon. The card says $1.96. We are keeping with the rule of this is a 10 to 50 cent card right now. Electro Siphon lets us counter any spell, and then we get an amount of energy counters equal to that spell's mana value. Then we have Generous Gift. Destroy any target permanent, and its controller gets an elephant token in its place. See, we're not evil. We're not literally the worst people in the entire world. We're not, moving to the section where we talk about Double Strike, we have 2 ways in this budget version of the deck to make our commander hit for double. So the first one is Fire Shrieker. It equips to a creature, gives a double strike. Very, very simple. But then we have Two-Handed Axe. This one's really interesting. So it has an instant cast ability that we can use on its adventure. So we get to pay 2 mana and cast it from our hand as an instant. Target creature we control has just gains double strike. So in the middle of doing our little combat trick shenanigans with our commander to raise its attack power by adding more 1/1 counters onto the Liberty Prime, the two-handed axe can just give it double strike at instant speed when somebody's just thinking, I can't block it, but it's okay, I'll live. No, you won't. You don't get to live. Absolutely not. Never give an American a weapon. We have no idea how to use them. Then, if you have it in the exile zone from casting it as an adventure, you can pay 3 to put it back on the board. And if you equip it to a commander, or any card really, if the equipped creature attacks, double its power until end of turn. Which, of course, means our commander will be hitting for damn near lethal every single time that it does its thing. So, that is a just astronomical amount of damage with our commander. But we are not done. We need to talk about those energy counters. How are we going to get them before our commander comes onto the board? Well, that's fairly simple. Let's start out with this 4-card energy counter package, beginning with Brotherhood Scribe, another new card from the deck. Brotherhood Scribe has Metalcraft. We can tap him to get a energy counter as long as we have 3 or more artifacts. Then, as long as we have, whenever we get 1 or more energy counters, creatures we control get 1/1 until end of turn. This, of course, makes Liberty Prime hit for that much harder with his definitely not imported steel. Then we have Janjit Sentry. When it ETBs, we get 2 energy counters. We can also tap it to get rid of 2 energy counters to tap or untap an artifact or creature, meaning that this is yet another way we get to just abuse Liberty Prime's ability. He gets the energy counters with his own ability, and then we can use Janjit to untap him and tap him again, and sack another artifact to draw another card to add more 1/1 counters to him, and just run off to the races. Then we have Fabrication Module, a 3-mana card that says anytime we get 1 or more energy counters, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Boy, howdy, I can think of a 1/1 counter magnet I'd like to put a whole bunch of counters on. Is it possibly the Freedom Punching Machine? I think it's the Freedom Punching Machine. Then we have, you can also pay for it to tap it and just get an energy counter. So you can slowly build up those energy counters on off turns. Then we have Dr. Madison Lee, a 3-mana creature who says when you cast an artifact spell, you just generate an energy. Then you can tap her and pay 1 energy to give a creature 1/0 trample and haste until end of turn. You know, just in case we need to make energy, just in case we need to make our commander hit for 1 damage more. Then we can tap her and pay 3 energy to draw a card, or we can tap her and pay 5 energy to return any artifact card from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So we get recursion with this as well. But I've talked about our commander drawing cards, but of course we need more ways to draw cards than what our commander is going to be doing. So let's go ahead and talk about our draw package. It's a 6-card draw package because we have a draw commander, but every card we have in here is packing a lot of punch. Starting with Stern Lesson, an instant that lets us draw 2 cards and then discard a card, and then create a tapped Power Stone token, which is a mana rock that can only be used for artifact spells or activated abilities. So, this is both ramp and draw at once. Then we have Glimmer of Genius. We get to scry 2, then draw 2, then get 2 energy counters. And it costs 1 mana less than our commander. Gee, that's convenient. We get to cast it on the turn right before our commander. That's wonderful. Then we have Reality Heist. Costs 1 less for every artifact we control. And we can look at the top 7 cards of our library and reveal 2 artifacts from them and put them in our hand. The rest go to the bottom at any order. So it is a typed 2-mana dig through time for our deck. Then we have Shimmer Dragon. As long as you control 4 or more artifacts, he has hexproof, and you can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to draw a card. Just tap your modular creatures before you sacrifice them to the all-powerful Bald Eagle. Then we have Thought Monitor. It has affinity for artifacts, and when it enters the battlefield, we get to draw 2 cards. It's also an artifact to sacrifice to the factory. Then we have Ttrgr, Betrayer of Flesh. The first activated ability of any artifact we control each turn costs 2 less to activate. Boy, howdy, it's so weird that Liberty Prime costs 2 to activate its ability. That's so strange. That's weird. I forgot about this, and Ttrgr had to remind me that this card existed, so thank you very much, Ttrgr, for reminding me of Ttrgr, Betrayer of Flesh. Then you can +1 on him to draw 2 cards, and then you discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact card. Then you can -2 on him to give an artifact, any artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it isn't a vehicle, it gains base power and toughness 4/4. And then you can pay 6 to get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped. Draw a card. So it's wonderful that Ttrgr gets to come down and immediately +1, and then we get to proliferate because our deck has a bunch of that. And then if we can defend him with Liberty Prime, not the easiest thing to do because it's one commander doing the defending, but he can. If we can defend him for a turn, we can just auto-ult him, and now suddenly we will basically run away with the game, because every single time we tap any artifact at all, we will draw a card. Do we lose Tezzeret that way? Probably. Is that okay? Also probably. But then we have another important section to talk about. We are also copying cards, because we need to be able to copy our modular creatures with cards like Saheeli's Sun Brilliance. Create a token that's a copy of another creature or an artifact you control, and again, give it an artifact type if it doesn't have one, and then it gains haste. Sack it at the beginning of your next upkeep, or your next end step. That's fine. We just want to make clones of our modular creatures, and then sacrifice them anyway. So that's fine. We're just going to do that over and over and over again. Then we have Sculpting Steel that can come into play as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. Literally pick your own adventure on what kind of dumb broken stuff you want to copy with this. Then we have Mirrorworks. If another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, pay 2, and then you can create a copy of that when it comes onto the battlefield. Create copies of all of our modular creatures, create copies of Sculpting Steel to make extra copies, create copies of Thought Monitor when it enters the battlefield, so you draw 4 cards instead of 2. Just Mirrorworks, again, create your own adventure with how broken you want this to be. Then we have Saheeli Sublime Artificer. If we cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless servo, which we can then sacrifice to the Freedom Machine. Then you can neg 2. Any artifact you control becomes a copy of another artifact or creature you control until end of turn. So any artifact we have that has a busted ass ability and we want to have more of that at any point, like say, I don't know, the Fabrication module. So anytime we get that energy, we just keep on stacking 1/1 counters on our commander. We get to do that. Or let's say that you want to make a copy of a 2-handed axe because our Liberty Prime has not been able to get his 1/1 counters. Now he gets Quadra Power, and Quadruple of 8 is enough to kill basically anybody with commander damage. This -2 is going to be doing a lot of extra work for you. Again, Saheeli Sun Brilliance can do it too. Since 2-handed axe doubles a creature's power instead of giving it double strike, our commander does not need to be in a situation where he's got 11 power to double up to 22. He can be at 8, and this will just get him there once we clone the 2-handed axe. So copying cards is wonderful. Copying modular creatures to sacrifice more of them is also wonderful. But we need to protect our commander. He's obviously going to be a target of a lot of things, so in the budget version of the deck, we have included at least 1 Mirror Shield, which can give him hexproof. And of course, we can clone this with cards like Saheeli, so that we have extra versions of it if we need them. Now, we need to be able to proliferate more often, so let's go ahead and talk about our 3-card proliferate package. Grateful Apparition and Thrumming Bird, both if they hit somebody in the face, we get to proliferate. And then Vivisurgent's Insight, if we use it, we get to draw 3 cards and then proliferate. But our artifacts are going to be targets of a lot of removal, so we need to have ways of getting those cards back. So let's go ahead and start out with Savine's Reclamation. Return any permanent card with a mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. But if this is cast from the graveyard, then we can just get any card. We can get 2 cards with it. Savine's Reclamation basically reanimates 3 cards over the course of its lifetime, and it does a ton of work in so doing. Now, since most of our cards are these modular creatures that we want to sacrifice multiple times, Savine's Reclamation is going to get us there. Also, Scrap Trawler is as well. If it or another artifact is put into a graveyard, return any artifact with mana value lesser than it to our hand. So if we have Arcbound Tracker and we sacrifice it, we just add the Arcbound Slith to our hand. And then when we sacrifice that, we add the Arcbound Worker to our hand. You see where we're going with this? We are going to just get super mega ultra value with the Scrap Trawler. And then we have Sun Titan. Anytime it enters the battlefield or attacks, return any permanent with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Again, get your modular creatures back and use them more often. Then we have Brilliant Restoration. Return all artifacts and enchantments from our graveyard to the battlefield, just immediately. As soon as you cast this card, you are probably winning the game, because there are not many situations outside of the America deck getting Bajuka bogged where this does not just create a game-winning scenario for you. If this gives you like your Fire Shrieker and your two-handed axe, and you've got Power Stone tokens to just tap and equip both of these, then our creature has double power and double strike. These two cards work together to give our commander the lethal damage that he so wants. Radiant Restoration does fuck tons of work. But if our commander doesn't have unblockable via the Sonic Screwdriver, we have to find other ways of giving him unblockable, which means we can also use the Manifold Key, which can also untap another artifact, which can also mean that our commander gets more power because he's sacrificing more cards. But look, here's the other problem, okay? We can't just sacrifice the modular creatures. We need other things to sacrifice, right? So we have this 4-card sack benefit section. Starting with Prize Statue, it makes a treasure token when it enters the battlefield, which is, of course, ramp for us. And then anytime it is put into a graveyard, we create another treasure token. Ichor Wellspring does similar. It draws us a card when it comes onto the battlefield, and also when it's sent to the graveyard. Mycosynth Wellspring gives us a land from our deck into our hand when it comes onto the battlefield, and also when it is sent to a graveyard, with our commander sacrificing these over and over and over again. And then finally, Slagstone Refinery. Anytime it or another non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, or is put into exile from the battlefield, you get to make a Power Stone token, which of course means the longer the game goes, the more Power Stone tokens we make. The more Power Stone tokens we make, the more we don't have to give 2 flying rats asses if our commander is killed multiple times by unruly, angry people who do not like the idea of hot dogs and freedom. But I have to get to the boring part of the deck, right? The part of the deck that talks about making sure that we can make our commander do its job, right? This is the land base, starting with the Omni land. Sorry, we're not actually boring. We're beginning with Power Depot. This is a artifact land that we can sacrifice to our commander that adds a mana of any color as long as it's for artifacts or their abilities. Otherwise, it gives you a colorless mana. But if we sacrifice it, the land has modular 1. The land comes into play with 1/1 counters and can throw the 1/1 counters onto our commander. It's a great card. Again, I run this in Modern. Command Tower can tap for any color. Exotic Orchard can tap for any color that our opponents have. And then, of course, we have our fetching land section, 8 cards deep, beginning with Grixis, Bant, Esper, and Naya Panoramas, which can grab 2 of the types of lands that our deck needs, depending on which one you have. They also come into play untapped, so they work very, very well for keeping up the pace of people. Same with Promising Veins and Shire Terrace. We, of course, also have Myriad Landscape and Ash Barrens. Both of these, the Myriad Landscape can get us 2 basic lands from our deck onto the battlefield, and that ramps us. And then the Ash Barrens can cycle itself to get us any land from our deck that is a basic and put it into our hand. Then we have the dual land section, beginning with Thriving Heath, Bluff, and Isle. Each and every one of these can tap for the color that we do not have access to if we put it onto the battlefield. So if we have a white mana on the board and we play Thriving Isle, we know we need red, so Thriving Isle can now tap for blue or red so that we have access to all of our mana. It's a very good trade-off for having a land that comes into play tapped. But as for cards that don't come into play tapped, Fury Calm Snarl, Frost Boil Snarl, and Port Town, as long as we reveal a basic land or a land that shares a type with them, then we can go ahead and get them into play untapped. Speaking of which, Prairie Stream will work for all of these. Every single one of these, if we reveal Prairie Stream, will come into play untapped, as well as, revealing any of the basic lands that they call for. Prairie Stream also comes into play untapped if we have 2 or more basic lands on the board. Skycloud Expanse is a filter land, and of course we are getting more filter lands in this set, but I didn't want to include the filter lands in the mana base here, just in case those have a huge amount of pull. Also, at between 10 and 50 cents, it would be a lot harder to actually fit them into the deck's budget. Then in the utility land section, we have Aether Hub. When it enters the battlefield, we get an energy counter. We can also tap it to pay an energy counter and get any mana of any color to our mana pool, but it also can tap for a colorless mana. This is a card that you probably should be including in more decks if you have not already, because while it does only give you colorless mana throughout most of the game, even in a non-energy deck, this can give you mana fixing the turn you desperately need it. Then we have Rogue's Passage, of course. We're going to make our commander unblockable with this. And then we have Helios 1. It taps for 1 colorless mana. Then we can pay 1 and tap it to give an energy counter to us. Or we can pay 3 and tap it to pay X energy counters and sacrifice it and blow up any non-land permanent with mana value X. The card is currently going for $3.89, but again, we are running with the going theory that these are going to be 10 to 50 cent cards once all is said and done. And with that, that is everything Liberty Prime Recharged has in it, at least for the budget version of the deck, if you want to put that together. The deck's total price of the commander ends up being within $1, like I assume it's going to be once everything is all done. The deck is about a $15 deck with a little bit of wiggle room for the cards we don't know how their prices are going to shake out in the secondary market. But I did promise you that we are going to have a full upgrade section for this deck, so let's go ahead and get into the $125 version of the deck that is going to be played over on the stack later today.
Primary targets: any and all red Chinese invaders. Emergency Communist Acquisition Directive. Immediate self-destruct. Better dead than red.
Alrighty, now let's talk about the $125 version of the deck. This version is a lot more flexible in what it can do, and it's got a few more tricks up its sleeve, because when you increase the budget of a deck, you don't really increase the power so much as you increase the variability that the deck can get involved with. So, as such, let's go ahead and go over the same sections that we talked about originally and see where we get a few different changes here. Beginning with the ramp package, we still have Honored Heirloom as a way to make sure that graveyard people are still kept honest, but we get to upgrade to the Talisman cycle, Talisman of Conviction, Progress, and Creativity. We also get to fit in a Soul Ring and an Arcane Signet, and we have Ethereum Sculptor still as a way to lower the cost of our cards, but we also get Artificer class for $4.33. The first artifact spell we cast each turn costs 1 less, and when we level it up by paying 2, reveal the top card of our library until we hit an artifact card, put that into our hand, and then at level 3, at the beginning of our end step, create a token copy of any artifact we control. That's right, we're copying modular creatures still. That is never changing. Then we have the Brothers' War, comes into play, gives us 2 Power Stone tokens. Then we can choose 2 target players until our next turn. Each creature they control attacks the other person. It's basically forcing goad, because what's better than being American but pretending that every other person is busy fighting each other while you're minding your own business? You're not. The Brothers' War then at level 3 will deal X damage to any target and X damage to any other target, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So we get to blow up 2 cards with this as well. At $1.52, this is doing a lot of work for our deck. And then, of course, we still have the Sonic Screwdriver. Everything I mentioned before is still true here. The Sonic Screwdriver gives us access to untaps as well. Then let's go ahead and talk the modular section like we did last time. A 13 card deep modular section because we have some more toys this time around. Arcbound Prototype, Mauser, Javelier, and Sylph all do the same things, as does Zabaz, Worker, and Arcbound Slasher. But with the new budget, we have access to a few new cards, like Scrapyard Recombiner that has Modular 2 and the ability to sack an artifact to search our library for a construct card. While we're not going to be really searching our library for constructs all that often in a deck like this, the main reason we're doing this is that we have an extra sacrifice trigger with this ability. Then we have Arcbound Crusher. Anytime another artifact enters our battlefield, we get to put a 1/1 counter on the Crusher, and then we can use all those 1/1 counters to go on Liberty Prime for maximum damage. Then we have Arcbound Reclaimer. We can remove a 1/1 counter from it at any point to put an artifact from our graveyard on top of our library, and it's got Modular 2. So if we need to sack it, we can, but most of the time we're going to use this as a way to constantly get more cards back for ourselves. You'll notice we cut out some of the more unwieldy modular creatures that weren't doing a lot for us, like the Whelp, in favor of keeping the ones that had mana value as aligned with their power from the modular trigger as we could, or gave us extra neat benefits like extra counters, an extra sack outlet, or recursion. We also have Together Forever still, like in the original build, but the new budget gives us access to a couple new toys, like Ripples of Potential. It's got a proliferate clause on it, and then we can choose any number of permanents we control that have a counter put on them this way, and phase them all out, which of course means we can phase our commander out and protect him with this. It's a mini Teferi's protection for us. And we get to use this to phase out all of our modular creatures in case a board wipe is coming our way, so that we can sack them, you know, the proper way, on our own terms. Then we have Resourceful Defense. Anytime a permanent we control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, we can put those counters on any other permanent that we control. So anytime that we... let me just let you know how this works with modular. So, when a modular creature dies, that is a death trigger, but when it leaves the battlefield, Resourceful Defense reads that as a leaves the battlefield trigger. This means that you create extra 1/1 counters. If the Arcbound Crusher had 1 counter, it throws 1 counter onto the commander, and then Resourceful Defenses will throw another 1/1 counter on the commander because it reads a completely separate trigger. It will basically double the amount of counters that we get to throw around the board every single time we do. If we have multiple sack outlets, then we can do this funny little thing where, say, we have Arcbound Worker, Slasher, and Javelier. Worker has a 1/1 counter on it. We kill it. It throws not 1 but 2 1/1 counters onto another creature when it dies because of the Resourceful Defenses. So we put those on Arcbound Slasher. Now it's a 5/5 with its modular ability and Riot. Now it's a 7/7. So then we sack this, and instead of throwing 7 counters onto the Arcbound Javelier, we're throwing 14 counters onto the Arcbound Javelier. Now this card is a 15/15, but let's say we sacrifice this 15/15 Arcbound Javelier. Its counters are not going over here to make this Arcbound Mauser a 16/16. No, it's doubling up again. Now we have 31 counters on the Arcbound Mauser, and if we sacrifice that and put him on the Freedom Machine, now he's way too big. Stop making me do math. If you have an infinite budget, you can also put in something like an Ozolith in here as well, but that's a $40 card, and I play it in Modern, and I hate that it costs so much. You could also put an Agatha Soul Cauldron in here, but I'm not saying that I would recommend you spending a deck's budget on an Agatha Soul Cauldron. But moving on, let's go to the interaction and removal section. We have Electro Siphon in here like before because it gives us that counterspell, Negate as well, Spine of Ishath as well, Resculpt as well, counterspell, Generous Gift. But with the extra budget, we have access to flexible cards like Chaos Warp and also Swords to Plowshare, one of the best removal spells in the game. Now, if you wanted to be more flexible, you could throw in a Stroke of Midnight instead, but I like having access to the Exile specifically, as Indestructible is a very hard thing for our deck to deal with sometimes. And then, of course, Arcane Denial, a really wonderful counterspell that makes you and an opponent draw cards after you counter a spell with this. Now, let's move on to the equipment section. We are actually using a different set of equipment this time around. No Fire Shrieker. We are keeping the two-handed axe, but we are also gaining a Hexplate Wall Breaker. This gives a creature 2/2, and if it attacks, if it's the first combat of the turn, then untap the creature and get another combat. We can use this to not only eliminate 1 player, but now 2 players. Then we have Basilisk Collar. An equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink, and it equips for 2. Now, the reason this is in the deck, not only is Death Touch a cool keyword, but Death Touch has a super neat synergy with Trample. Because Death Touch says we get anytime we deal damage to a creature, it dies automatically, and Trample says we deal lethal damage to a creature and then spill the rest of the damage over onto somebody. If you have Death Touch on a creature and Trample, you only deal 1 damage to the creature and the rest spills over into their life. Let's say they're blocking your Liberty Prime with a creature that has toughness of 3. Normally, Liberty Prime would hit in and do 5 damage to the opponent because it is an 8/8. If it has Death Touch, however, it is now doing 7 damage to the opponent because only 1 of its damage needs to be placed onto the enemy card, which is massive for us. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the energy section. It is largely the same, but we have added with our budget the Aetherworks Marvel. Anytime a permanent we control is put into a graveyard, we gain energy, and then we can pay 6 energy to look at the top 6 cards of our library, cast any card from among them without paying its mana cost. Most of the time, we are not generating enough energy to get this effect, but in the event that we do, the Aetherworks Marvel is going to put in a lot of work in pushing us ahead in the game. Speaking of pushing us ahead in the game, let's talk about the deck's draw engine. It is largely the same. Stern Lesson, Glimmer of Genius, Thought Monitor, and Ttrgr, but we also have access to Joyra, the Weatherlight Captain. Anytime we cast a historic spell, now we get a chance to draw a card. In our copy section, we have kept Saheeli, and we have added a Phyrexian Metal Morph while taking the other cards out because we have added copies into things like our ramp section. Phyrexian Metal Morph can come as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield except it's an artifact. The reason we have upgraded to this is the Metal Morph has the distinct ability of being able to become a copy of anything an opponent has as well, giving our deck even more flexibility. Because of the added budget, we also have access to more cards like Board Wipes in this build, which we couldn't fit in the original version. This gives us access to Ondu Inversion, which can blow up all non-land permanents. We, of course, have ways of blinking our commander out before using this, but generally speaking, if we are dealing with a lot of enchantments, planeswalkers, and otherwise, Ondu Inversion can get us through, and then we can just cast Liberty Prime later with extra mana. Then we have Tragic Arrogance. For each player, you choose from them a artifact, creature, and an enchantment, and a planeswalker, and then they sacrifice all other non-land permanents that they control. Tragic Arrogance is a wonderful card in our deck because we just choose to keep our command, make everybody sacrifice all of their other important cards, and then we get to be ahead because we don't care about sacrificing our modular creatures. We sacrifice them all the time and just get a bunch of counters because of it. That's perfectly fine by us. In the Proliferate section, we have a completely overhauled Proliferate section, as we do not have to worry about the tighter restriction on the budget, beginning with Throne of Geth, giving us another sack outlet that also proliferates when it sacks, Norn's Choir Master, which will give us the Proliferate trigger anytime it attacks or enters the battlefield. Well, rather, whenever a commander you control enters the battlefield or attacks, you will proliferate. Sorry. Then we have Staff of Completion, a mana rock that can either blow up a permanent we own, which can give us more modular triggers, add a mana of any color, or it can proliferate for us, or it can draw us a card. This is a omni tool for us, and it does a good bit of work in terms of being very, very flexible. Then we have Inexorable Tide. Whenever we cast a spell, proliferate. This will give us a lot of energy counters and 1/1 counters for our commander and modular creatures before we sack them. Then we go to the protection section, which of course is overhauled with the new budget. We have access to Winged Boots, which will give our commander flying and ward 4. Lightning Greaves, which will give our commander Shroud, and then our Swiftfoot Boots, which will give it hexproof and haste. Lightning Greaves, you will need to make sure that you move it around the board to give other equipments to our commander if we need to, but it fits very well in this deck because, of course, we are not running a bunch of equipment for our commander. We are simply trying to sacrifice a bunch of stuff and give our commander benefits with that. Speaking of sacking, the only cards left from the sack benefits section are Slagstone Refinery and Ichor Wellspring. From the untapped synergies, we still have the Manifold Key to give our commander unblockable, and we can untap artifacts with it, but we also got to slot in an Umbral Mantle, which says we can pay 3 to untap a creature and give it 2/2 until end of turn. Now we can swing with our commander for 8, tap him for his ability, sack a modular creature to give him power, then pay 3 to untap him, give him 2 more power, and then tap him again to sack another modular creature to give him more power, and then pay 3 to untap him. Basically, if we've got a lot of Power Stone tokens throughout the game, or a lot of mana that we've got otherwise, we just take it into Umbral Mantle and lethal somebody by untapping our commander a bunch of times in a single combat step. The card is nutty. It does very, very silly things. It equips for 0 too. It's really efficient. And then we go to our Reanimation and Recursion section. We've kept the Sabine's Reclamation, the Scrap Trawler, and the Brilliant Restoration. But we have added the portal to Phyrexia for one reason and one reason only. I told you Phyrexia has oil! We are here to get that Phyrexian oil because we are America, and that is why we invade planes. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, meaning our commander can get through easier. And if it is the beginning of our upkeep, put any creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control and turn it into a Phyrexian. We can steal our opponent's best creatures with this. We can reanimate our own modular creatures with this. We can do so much with this card. If we get to the late game and we drop Portal to Phyrexia on somebody, they know America's a-coming because we found the oil. But we gotta talk about the land section, of course. So let's go ahead and move over to the dual lands. With the extra budget, we get to have a more refined land section. With Port Town as our only reveal land, we get to have Prairie Stream as our Tango land, but we get to upgrade to Glacial Fortress, Sulphur Falls, Shivan Reef, Battlefield Forge, and Clifftop Retreat. The check lands and pain lands, respectively, that are available within our deck's budget. Our fetching land section is basically identical. Our Omni land section is basically identical, but our utility land section has managed to get a little bit bigger. We've kept Helios 1, Aether Hub, and Rogue's Passage, but we've been able to add in a Buried Ruin that can sacrifice itself to get an artifact from our graveyard to our hand, and a Karn's Bastion, which we can tap it and pay 4 to proliferate, which gives us, of course, more energy counters and more 1/1 counters onto our modular creatures before we sacrifice them for the power of the Bald Eagle. So that is the total deck build for Liberty Prime Recharge. This is the $125 version, and Ttrgr will be playing this one on stream at, I believe, 2 o'clock Eastern today, on Sunday. If you missed the stream, there's going to be a link to Ttrgr's channel. Go ahead and check out that stream even later if it ends up happening and you're not able to make it at the time. But this was a deck that me and them both worked on, and it took us a very long time. We had a several days of trying to plan, and then sitting down and actually like building the deck together several hours. And like as I was going, okay, we've built the $125 version of the deck that you can play on stream. Now I'm gonna lay down and sleep. And he's like, well, hold on, we still have to make the $15 version. I'm like, oh, I don't get to sleep anymore. That's fine. I guess we'll keep talking about the Freedom Robot. Remember, Liberty Prime, you are not a gun. You are what we propagandize you to be. But with that all said, this was a wonderful, fun deck to work on with Ttrgr, and please check out their channel over on the Stack. Check out the gameplay of the deck once that goes up on literally later today in a few hours. I hope you all enjoyed the deck. I had a fun time building it with them, and I am hoping that y'all will have a fun time playing the deck once the Fallout cards release in a few days. And of course, when those prices settle, maybe I'll be made a liar on the $15 version of the deck, but I don't think I'm going to be made a liar on that one. With that all said, though, I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below. Go follow their channel, hit the subscribe button, do all that fun stuff. And as always, everybody, thank you for watching, and insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Nabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.